October 14th, 2014 City of Port Orchard Council meeting to order, and would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. We'll start off with item number 2, citizens' comments, and Ms. Whittleton has signed up, so would you please come up and give us your comments, please?
Evening. We're going to try to play you a recording of some minutes, and I'd like to explain the following are excerpts from the June and July utility meeting minutes, which refer to home-based businesses being assessed commercial storm sewer rates. I have been assured this won't happen, but I have seen no supportive evidence of that. It cannot be assumed that all homes where home-based businesses operate cover less than 3,000 square feet of impervious surface. Please adjust the verbiage associated with this, the verbiage which is in Port Orchard Municipal Code 1306020, in order to protect our home-based businesses. Thank you. We'll give it a whirl.
License, even if it is home-based business, you are technically commercial. And so we go out and we assess based on your impervious surface unit. Most cases, a single-family residence, if they're doing a home-based business, will not see a change. Where we've had a home-based business that went into a home. The home was 4,500 square feet. By the time I added sidewalks and driveways on, they ended up going up to 2 ISUs each month because they decided to do a home-based business. So in a case like that, as long as they're not doing a home-based business and they have a very large home, they still only pay for 1 ISU.
Or towns how complicated.
Bed and breakfast. So the thing is, the way that the code is set up and the way that we handle the accounts is if you have a business license, even if it is home-based business, you are technically commercial. And so we go out and we assess based on your impervious surface unit. Most cases, a single-family residence, if they're doing a home-based business, will not see a change.
I hope you could understand some of that. And I know I emailed to all the councilmen the points where you could review the tape and check it out and see for yourself what we're talking about. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, for the benefit of the public just came in, we're on item 2, citizens' comments, and we're taking citizen comments at the beginning and at the end of the meeting. If you'd like to make comments, please raise your hand to be identified and come up, please.
For the record, I'm Gary Anderson, Post Office Box 635, Port Orchard, Washington. I want to address my comments pertaining to the city's review of the comp plan with respect to the urban growth boundaries. I've prepared notes, so I'm just going to read from my notes just to make it simple. South Kitsap has a problem. If you take a 10,000-foot view of the area from the Narrows Bridge to the Agate Pass Bridge, there's a problem that should be evident to all. South Kitsap is different from Gig Harbor, Silverdale, or Paulsbo. We have a cute waterfront town that has great potential but does not have a robust economy. We have an industrial area to support the city with jobs, but it is too small in size to provide enough jobs to support our community. We have a school system strongly dedicated to the community, but most of our graduates have to leave the community to find opportunity. We have a less vibrant commercial core, we have large retail vacancy, and we have difficulty attracting new additions to our retail and restaurant options. When most areas around the Puget Sound are enjoying strong growth and busy, profitable commercial segments, South Kitsap struggles to offer its residents options that they must go elsewhere to find. There's a reason for this. Currently, South Kitsap draws from a population of approximately 60,000 residents to support its commercial segments. In addition, the average income is approximately $45,000 per year. These facts make it difficult to attract interest from retail and industrial investment into the community. The recent discussion about the size of the urban growth boundaries is a concern to me. The last time the county attempted to obtain approval for the comp plan, it determined that cutting back the urban growth boundaries was the way to obtain approval. This action may have been necessary to obtain approval, but it also sent a message to the greater Puget Sound area and the development community that Kitsap County did not want growth. Now that we're beginning the process of updating both the city and county comprehensive plans, this issue is unnecessarily rearing its ugly head again. We do not need to tell the development community again that we do not welcome development, and further the business community that we will not likely provide the necessary population to sustain a vibrant commercial core. Let me offer you a few examples. Home Depot. After over 4 years of pursuing a building permit, when they finally received it, they abandoned their plans to build a store. Why? After Lowe's beat them to the punch, and with the downturn in the economy, Home Depot determined that there was not enough business here to risk building a store. Target. Target looked seriously at placing a store on the Sedgwick-Sydney intersection twice, for the purpose of placing a store in an interim market that served the customers in between the Gig Harbor store and Silverdale store and improved their distribution by doing so. When the downturn in the market hit, they also determined there was not enough population or dollars in the South Kitsap market area to justify building a store. Sonic Burger, same thing. YMCA, same thing. The size of the local population and the average incomes are two separate but related problems. Solving the income problem is a matter of encouraging residents to live here who have higher incomes or providing local higher-paying jobs to individuals who reside here. I'm not going to address this issue here tonight, but we don't entice people with higher-paying jobs or incomes to live here. If we don't entice them, we have only one other solution to the problem. We must encourage population growth into our community. I do not support the idea that the urban growth boundaries should be reduced. If we want to give our residents a higher quality of life, provide jobs, sustain a strong and vibrant commercial core so we can better enjoy better roads, parks, schools, and amenities, we need to encourage growth and embrace the existing urban growth boundaries and the commercial corridors that now exist. These are all opportunities that, if enhanced and promoted, can cure the problem that currently exists in South Kitsap. That's all I have. Any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, hey, Gary, I guess I do have a question. So you're saying that you're against reducing your urban growth boundaries, and you think that that'll provide, that will help overcome the obstacles you see, right, or no? Or?
I'm very concerned about sending a message to the development community that we aren't encouraging growth here. That message seems to be pervasive amongst the larger Puget Sound region, especially if you talk to commercial developers and so forth. In my experience, Home Depot, for example, the CEO of Home Depot at one time made a comment that working in Kitsap County was the worst place in the entire country to get a building permit, understandably so. And you know, those kind of messages going out don't just, you know, infect a few people, and it affects a lot of people. And I think that message is, it's not the city of Port Orchard's fault primarily. I blame largely on our county commissioners for a large portion of that message. But nevertheless, we live here in South Kitsap, and I think the South Kitsap community considers itself to be a part of the city of Port Orchard, whether they are living in the city limits or not. And we all want to be part of a community that is a vibrant community and has a lot to offer its citizens. And we see other parts of the county and even Pierce County that are nearby enjoying what I perceive to be, and I'm sure many do, a more vibrant community that offers a lot of things to its citizens. And I think, as I've lived here my entire life, grew up here, my family homesteaded in Olalla in 1872. So I'm a longtime resident and I'm invested here and invested in the city of Port Orchard. I'd really like to see it offer our citizens just a higher quality of life. And I think when we send the message out that says we don't want development here, we probably theoretically think we don't want the place packed with all kinds of residents, but you got to have people paying the way to support the kind of things that we want to enjoy in our life. And the only way you can do it is with more residents. Thank you.
Gary, did I hear you say that you're more, if we reduce RUGA, that puts more area under the purview of the county, and that's what you're concerned with?
Well, the city and the county match their UGAs.
Correct.
Okay, because the intent of the UGA is that eventually it'll be annexed into the city. Now that may or may not happen. You have to have a petition for that to occur. So I don't think that's something to be concerned about. And I understand the point that sometimes annexing residential areas are sometimes a little more costly. But you have to have the residential areas and the population to support the things, the commercial cores that sustain all of the goods and services that we want. So, you can't have one without the other.
Okay.
Gary, I was just wondering, that comment about the CEO made of Home Depot, was that made prior to annexation into Port Orchard?
Yes, it was.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other member of the public who would like to take this opportunity to address the council? Okay.
My name is Pat Waters. I had heard that I'd like to speak to this consideration for downsizing the urban growth area. I've been in business in the city.
Can you speak in the mic? I'm sorry.
Been in business here in the city since '94 and operated a construction company. And during the heyday, we had a real hard time finding lots to build on, property that could be developed. And some of the areas I think that you're looking at downsizing have resources that if you downsize those areas, it's going to stop a lot of things. I'll give you an example. Down Bethel Road, there's a lot of planned developments and there's large sewer capacity there. And it was always the intent, I've been following this process for probably at least 15 years. I was involved with the county and then also with the cities. I was on the committees at the city here too. But when their intention was to loop the sewer around down Billmeyer Road and down Phillips. And I know that there's people that purchased those properties because they went into the urban growth area prior to, or even after the downsizing that were there. And now if you're looking at downsizing those and taking away places where growth is supposed to happen in the cities, smart growth dictates that we grow from the city. And I think the city should be the last person that looks at bringing back those defined areas. And this was studied and it was remanded and reviewed and lots of public meetings that established these guidelines. And if we do that, we're really taking a lot of work that's happened over a course of 15 years and kind of throwing it out the window. So just from my experience and all of the different things that I've seen happen, I just don't think it would be wise to do that. I don't think it would help the building community, the residential community, also the sewer. That's what they've talked about doing, and I think the areas should be maintained for the city, and the cities are responsible to accept the growth and actually promote the growth. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item 3, approval of the agenda. Just one, we sent an addition or added one item late this afternoon, and I think you sent out, and there's also one on your table. And so it's item G. It's item 7G, business item 7G. It was a last-minute addition. Did you get a copy of it?
Did.
Okay. Anyhow, approval of the agenda?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to add 4E, excluding Mr. Clausen and Mr. Patanzu from tonight's meeting.
Okay, we'll add 4E, exclude Mr. Patanzu and Mr. Clausen.
I'd second that.
Excuse. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. Thank you.
And, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to add business item 7H for approval of an expense for marketing material for the West Sound Transportation Alliance.
Okay, approval for West Sound Marketing?
Marketing material for the West Sound Transportation Alliance.
Transportation Alliance. Okay, and I'll call on you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion to add H. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adding H to our consent agenda, or to our business items? All those say aye. In favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries. Anything else?
Yeah,
Yes.
actually, I'm basically going to petition the council members here on items 7A and 7B. I'd like to remove them from the business agenda until council members Patanzu and Clausen return. I feel like that issue of public records requests and these two resolutions would be benefited by the additional discussion that they would provide with us. I don't know if that's a motion. It's kind of a long one, isn't it?
Well, your motion
I
is
move to
to...
remove items 7A and 7B until such time as council members Clausen and Patanzu return to share in the discussion.
I can second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and the motion is to remove business items 7A and 7B until a later date.
And I would
Discussion.
just, a discussion, I would ask the city clerk, does that cause you any grief if those are put off?
Nope.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of removing items 7A and B for discussion later, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, that motion carries. Anything else? We're still on the consent agenda. Or no, wait a minute, did we pass?
the agenda.
Yeah, we're on the agenda. Yeah, we're on the regular.
I would move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Motion and 2 seconds to approve the consent, or the agenda as amended. All those, or any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Okay, we have an amended, approved agenda. Consent agenda items.
I would move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the amended consent agenda. All those, or any other discussion? Nope. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Okay. We're on item 5, presentation, and we're at item 5A, KRCC Kitsap Multimodal Plan. Mr. Dorsey, could you bring us up to a little bit of speed on what this is about?
Yes, Mayor. So we have Jennifer from the Heffron Transportation Incorporated. They were hired by KRCC to prepare a countywide multimodal plan. And I believe she's here to give the summary of the Phase 1 work and the work plan moving into Phase 2.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I guess we'll make sure that all your technical stuff is up and running, and
All
you
looks
have the
good.
floor. Thank you.
So my name is Jennifer Barnes, and as Mark mentioned, I'm with Heffron Transportation, and we've been working with the KRCC members for about a year on Phase 1 of the Kitsap Countywide Multimodal Transportation Plan. And so what Phase 1 has been is review and assessment of many previous plans and reports related to transportation completed by all of the Kitsap jurisdictions that are participating in this project, and also regional, state, and federal that are relevant to countywide planning. That is, all of our findings from that work have been summarized in originally what was a preliminary draft Phase 1 Plan and Policy Report that was completed last spring, and the members of the KRCC Trans-TAC Committee and also the planning directors reviewed those preliminary findings, and we had a workshop that included Trans-TAC and planning directors to review what the report had found so far and to answer some of the questions that had emerged in our review. All of the feedback that we received, both at that workshop and in written form from various agencies, were incorporated into a draft plan and policy report, and that's the document that we have now that's available, that if it hasn't been provided to you, it's Mark has it or I haven't, either of us could provide it. And the executive summary that I believe was included in your packet that comes straight out of that report. So by my count, we reviewed over 100 plans and reports and policy documents at all levels, as I mentioned. The report provides an assessment of different policies and procedures, and that is categorized by travel mode and also by a number of policy topics that were defined by primarily by the KRCC members. And there was a lot of kind of input and coordination between the KRCC members into coming up with that list. Our goal was to identify through this review consistencies and inconsistencies between the different jurisdictional plans as it would relate to multi-jurisdictional planning, and also identify gaps and opportunities that could be addressed in the development of the actual plan, which is planned for Phase 2 of this project. The Plan and Policy Report also included an assessment of demographic and transportation trends countywide to further kind of enrich our analysis. And the conclusions of this Phase 1 report, and including feedback that we received from you and from other agencies as part of this process, is all informing the development of the Phase 2 scope, which is actual development of the plan. And so the conclusions of our Phase 1 are basically the recommendations of what should be included in the scope for Phase 2, and that's what I'm going to focus on for the rest of this evening. So some of our key findings. Our big key, of course, a major finding is we recognize that the comprehensive plan updates are happening, are starting more or less now. Some of them have been going for a little while and are due to be completed by mid-2016. So this multi-jurisdictional plan, the goal is to supplement these individual agency comprehensive plans that are happening over this same period and not to replicate the work. So to do that, what we're recommending and what the report recommends is to focus on countywide multi-jurisdictional issues, projects and priorities that can be challenging to include in local plans just by the very nature that they're multi-jurisdictional. Another major recommendation from our report is that because the comprehensive plan update process is going to be going on concurrently, we are recommending that rather than have a separate public involvement process for this multi-jurisdictional plan, that the public involvement be integrated into local agencies' public involvement processes that you have planned and will be happening for the individual comprehensive plan updates. The reason for this, the number one reason for this, is just to avoid confusion, that transportation planning, whoever the agency or combinations of agencies are, to the public, it doesn't really matter, it's all transportation, and we think it's going to be less confusing and more efficient to work with local staff and integrate the information about these concurrent efforts. And then also just that it's most efficient use of public resources and the community members' time. So we have a number of topics that are recommended as the major scope elements of the multi-jurisdictional transportation plan. I have them listed here. I'm not going to read through them because I have a slide for each one of them. So the first is establishment of a countywide transportation network for the purposes of the plan. Part of this, the big reason for this, is that in order to define a definite scope for the multi-jurisdictional plan, we want to be clear about what is the network that we're talking about. We expect that all state routes would be included, and so we think that most of the effort related to this part is just working with local jurisdictions to identify any other roads that are appropriate to include in what we would call a countywide transportation network that would have countywide significance. And we've got some factors that we think would probably go into that consideration listed here. Corridors that serve inter-county or regional transportation demand, freight, transit corridors, and I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly, and just where kind of major facilities with countywide significance are located. Another major element that we've identified would be appropriate for inclusion in the multi-jurisdictional plan is, I've lumped it together, freight and airport element. Our work that we've done up to this point, most existing plans and policies related to freight in the Kitsap County area are related to, I guess, the area formerly known as SKIA, now called the Puget Sound Industrial Center, Bremerton, and where the Bremerton National Airport is located. And so we think there's potential, or there's opportunity to kind of consolidate those different planning efforts related to that area. But one of the big gaps that we also identified is that that's really the only area that emerges when we're looking at plans and policies about freight. So we see this as an opportunity for where there may be other areas in and around Port Orchard that you feel are important, especially as you're getting into your comp plan update and looking at your land use plans, that by identifying areas as freight centers and how the freight network how well it does or doesn't support access to those centers, we think there's a great amount of potential there. The Washington State Department of Transportation has and continues to put a lot of energy into freight planning, and so our goal for the jurisdictions of Kitsap would be to have an element that is very clear, written in the vernacular of that WashDOT understands and that freight planning understands, so that you have kind of all of the information that you need to support investment in transportation that would support freight. Another major area of that was identified, talking to particularly to the TransTac members, is complete streets. This doesn't have to be a multi-jurisdictional effort, but there was consensus at our workshop that there could be a lot of advantage to having kind of a consistent set of standards and policies related to complete streets. And we've put green streets with that because we recognize that when you're making decisions about the appropriate combination of facilities to put into a roadway right-of-way, that stormwater is a big part of that and continues to be a kind of growing consideration with green streets. So there's countywide policies that are pretty strong already supporting complete streets, but there's a need identified by the KRCC members to take that to the next step and establish more specific, what does that mean from a design standpoint? If we have these policies to consider all users, pedestrian, bicycle, vehicle, transit, and freight, what does that mean from a facility planning guide, and what are the standards, and what are the trade-offs, and what are the considerations that need to go into that kind of planning? Another area that emerged as a pretty big gap in our review of the different plans and reports was related to local transit. The local jurisdictions, including Port Orchard, has pretty specific policies wanting more local transit service and off-peak transit service. Everybody was consistent. I would say all the jurisdictions were consistent in seeking transit to support ferry and also commuter. But there is a gap that we've identified in the desire for more local and off-peak transit, and just the reality that Kitsap Transit is facing with, didn't mean to do that, that Kitsap Transit is facing with, it's a resource issue. And so we think there's opportunity to also take things a step forward for transit. I mean, we can't create revenue to pay for local transit, but we can work with local jurisdictions and Kitsap Transit to identify, when we're talking about local transit, what are we actually talking about? What are the routes that would make sense for local transit, say in Port Orchard, and start putting some cost with that, and do enough land use and demand analysis to support that, so that we can start bridging that gap between policies that really support this type of service and the current reality where there isn't a lot being provided in Kitsap County. Transportation system performance measures. This is something that's trickled down from federal guidelines under the current federal transportation law, MAP 21, has very strong policy language about system performance measures and integrating that into planning processes and, more importantly, funding processes. This is something that there's a lot of policy language at this point, and what that means, what the actual rules are still emerging. And so this is a really good time to be paying attention to this. And there was definite consensus between the different KRCC members that this is another piece that would be logical to be addressed at a countywide level, where with system-wide performance measures, keeping in mind tracking the rules that come down at the federal level. Puget Sound Regional Council is tracking this very heavily too, so staying involved in their processes. Washington State Department of Transportation, particularly in the freight department, are also being pretty proactive about trying to help define what this means. So we see this as a good opportunity to be part of that conversation and also develop measures that are consistent with these more specific rules as they come out. And the last element is we're calling countywide project programming. We very much want to, a good plan is a plan that can be implemented, and so part of the last piece is something that would be continued, which is already happening under phase one, which is to review the sources of revenue that jurisdictions typically utilize to fund countywide projects, identify if there's other potential sources of revenue that could be considered, and kind of make sure that the that the plan is developed in a way that's consistent with the rules and requirements and the terminology to support those different funding sources. So just to wrap up here, our next steps on this, we're currently in the middle, I'm pretty much smack in the middle of briefings to all the local councils and commissions. That's happening, started in mid-September and will go through early November. I will emphasize that the report that we've provided, that the executive summary was extracted from, is still a draft, and we're still very, very, would welcome any feedback that you have, and you can, oops, I guess I don't need that anymore anyway. You can either let me know directly, or you can work with Mark, and any questions or feedback or just input that you have with respect to either the plan and policy report or the Phase 2 recommendations, we very much welcome. We'll be coordinating primarily with the KRCC TransTac staff to finalize the Phase 2 work plan, which is just a detailed scope supporting these different major pieces that I've been talking about. And the Phase 2 development is scheduled to begin in 2015, which would be development of the actual plan.
Okay. Council, questions? Stump the speaker time. Yes.
I realize
Chang.
this is sort of like meta planning or planning about planning, but what would make it more interesting, I think, to more people is if you could include some kind of a map, even if the map isn't going to have like specific corridors that you're going to be discussing, like what is a freight corridor? Is it SR3, SR16, maybe Sedgwick? Something at least that I think people could gravitate towards. I would love that in the next maybe executive summary.
Okay.
Okay. Any other?
Question, if I might. It's been a while since I've been on the KRCC and the Transpol, but I thought at one time on freight out at Skia there was a discussion of potential rail. Is that still being looked at for freight mobility in that area?
That's something that, and I've already talked to the Port of Bremerton. They're very, very interested in further exploring that.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, you could check us off your list, at least on the initial
I do have one
presentation.
question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it just kind of coming to me as I was being told I was through. The freight centers,
Yes.
you've identified a freight center as Skia or the Bremerton.
What we've identified is that that is what emerges as a freight center in this area. But if there's other freight centers, that those don't emerge quite so clearly.
Describe what that will mean to be designated a freight center. What would that mean?
It's mainly, I guess, for the purposes of transportation planning. I mean, there are grants out there that to support freight movement. So if you have a plan that's a freight or a plan that has a freight element, it says here's the freight centers that we've identified in Kitsap County. Here's the transportation network that supports those centers. And in the cases where there might be deficiencies, here are the improvements that we need to provide, to improve access to and from these centers. So identifying them allows you to evaluate the network, the transportation, at least from a transportation
Allows you to share in the
standpoint.
dollars that might become available for improving transportation to freight centers?
It
Is that
at
what you're
least
saying?
gives you the tools that you need to try to go for those dollars. I mean, if you don't do that, you're not going to get those dollars guaranteed.
What crossed my mind is our Port Orchard Business Park has been growing and is our freight center. I think we'd all agree. And so if we wanted it to be included, it should be included. I don't know where Nick is, but.
Right,
is that what you're
that's
saying?
exactly, and that if that one thing that was really clear reading through all these plans and reports, that outside of the area formerly known as Skia, which I'm still converting my ability to call it by the right name, it's really not clear other freight centers in Kitsap County. So this would be an opportunity, I mean, not only for that area, for the Bremerton airport area and that surrounding industrial area. I mean, that's important and has countywide significance as well. But if there are other areas those are not apparent in the existing plans and reports. And so this can provide an opportunity to say collectively, here are freight centers in Kitsap County, here's the network that supports them, and then that just gives you another tool that you can use when you are looking at potential sources of funding for improvements along that network.
You made one more comment that made me think about the transit or the passenger ferry element, and it was that, there's only so much money, and so therefore we have to live within, or Kitsap Transit has to live within their means. But I would not take exception, but point out that I think some of their methodology of evaluating where bus service is and isn't going to go has traditionally been that from Bremerton north into the Silverdale and Paulsville areas seems to have maintained their service better than from Bremerton south into the South Kitsap areas. And yet for me, in thinking about how people use transit service, having worked in Seattle for years and knowing the certain neighborhoods that are of low income, those are the neighborhoods that traditionally need transit type of transportation more
Right.
than neighborhoods that have, say, a more affluent economic, or just better off.
Right.
And so I'm just wondering, I personally think of South Kitsap is kind of a lower income area, and yet we're an area that's, for example, our transit service on Sundays, for example, we can't even get to the ferry service from South Kitsap, and I'm sure there's many people who work down here. So when I look at that element, I think, what do we do to somewhat protest how that's gone?
I guess protest isn't part of our recommendation, but having that conversation in the local jurisdiction, Kitsap Transit is part of this partnership as well, and in fact, they're going to be the lead contracting authority on the Phase 2 project. So what I see is a great opportunity for, rather than, and I've worked on a lot of local comprehensive plans myself. Typically we have policies that say this is what we want, right, to the transit agency, because you don't have control for the most part of where transit service is provided. So that's completely appropriate. I think this multi-jurisdictional plan with Kitsap Transit as a partner, I think provides a great opportunity to have that conversation about where are the needs, where is local service warranted or desired, or maybe desired and warranted, that where it's not being provided right now. And while we can't manufacture the money to pay for all of that service, getting that clearly defined and land use and demand analysis being part of that helps local jurisdictions articulate, bridge that gap from policy, we want more local service, to what that actually means. But it also starts putting some real numbers and some real oomph behind that policy desire, and then we have a little more information as we're moving forward, whether there's changes in revenue outlook or where there's maybe some potential sources for other revenue that can be I guess at least considered or applied for, but by having, it just gives us, it turns your policy into more concrete, this is what we're talking about, and it puts all of the important players at the table as part of that conversation.
Thank you.
So let's say that the good councilman there would like to make comments on page 7, executive summary, freight, and maybe even down there on passenger ferries. How would he get to these pages? Where are they?
Do you have a copy of the?
Well, you don't have a website where you could actually go on there and say, in regard to page 7 of your executive summary, we think
I have
this.
a website for comments, but you can either, are you asking where you can get a copy of the report, or where you can just send the
No, we have the
comments?
executive
Yeah.
summary.
So
But how would we get comments into?
you can email Mark, or you can email me. And Mark, if you email Mark, he will send it to me. So, and Mary McClure, the executive
Okay,
director.
so
for
that's
KISS.
how we do it, just get a hold of them. Exactly what you said should be written down in a paragraph. and sent over, because it's good, they're good comments.
Yes.
And the more of you they hear from, the more they'll pay attention to it, yeah.
Yes, we love comments and we love your feedback, so thank you.
Anything else? Well, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And I hope you'll be back. As this process moves on, you'll probably come back
Yes,
again.
yes,
Keep us
it's,
informed.
it's a very exciting project, so, yeah, it's been fun to work on and continue to move it forward.
Okay, well,
so.
hopefully you'll get some input from the city of Port Orchard.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's our.
Okay, we're at our next transportation impact fee rate analysis, and Mr. Dorsey's going to lead us, or bring us up to speed on this. And Mr. Dorsey?
So the next transportation-related conversation presentation is the much-awaited transportation impact fee analysis. Victor Samlin of TSI and Anthony Weiland, I think, is Anthony here? Okay, and is he from David Evans or TSI? Okay, I assumed it's a joint task, so I guess with that, Victor will be explaining where we're at on our traffic impact fee conversation.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Welcome. So I have a brief presentation and kind of just with a basic impact fee overview. Essentially, impact fees are a tool to fund infrastructure authorized by the GMA, really in support of development. Some basic statutory requirements: they do need to be related to growth. They do need to be in your comprehensive plan and your capital facilities plan. And there are some very significant benefits to impact fees. And one of the big ones is basically predictable costs for development. When you don't have an impact fee, it's not that development's not paying something for transportation mitigation, and the problem is they don't know what they're paying until after they go through your development review process and do their studies and identify all their impacts. A good impact fee program has established those impacts in advance, established a price, so a developer knows up front, and that's a big decision helper for them. And then on the other half, it creates predictable revenue for Mark and his staff so that they can implement the transportation plan that you desire. So some common impact fee methodologies. There's a lot of flexibility in terms of how we do it. The most typical is cost per vehicle trip. That's pretty easy to predict and measure. Some agencies are moving to a much more complicated cost per person trip and trying to include things more than roadways. It's possible to do. It gets a little more challenging. Most cities use a single zone just because it's simpler, and pretty much, especially of a city of your size, a project in one part of town is generally going to impact your whole transportation system. And it's generally very difficult when you have a multi-zone system where the price might be significantly different, say 30% different on one side of a street than the other side of the street. Explaining that to the developer on one side versus the other side also can become challenging. So most jurisdictions by far use a single service area or single zone system. So projects that are eligible for impact fees, your typical intersection expansion and improvements that typically would help you meet your level of service standard, reduce the delays at those intersections. Those intersections won't work unless the roadways between them are improved as well, so roadway expansion and improvements are eligible, as long, again, they're in your comprehensive plan and supported by those policies. And then also previously constructed improvements or projects that you might build in advance to encourage development, you can then charge future development to essentially recover the cost of that project. So you actually don't have to wait to receive the fee to start building those projects that support growth. You could build them in advance and then recover that cost. So in terms of working with Port Orchard and the staff, you currently don't have a transportation impact fee. We looked at two different areas of transportation project costs, the planned roadway projects in your current comprehensive plan, and then there's a set of improvements specifically agreed to with the McCormick Urban Village development that we initially tried to see if there was a way to incorporate those, but determined it'd be better if they were excluded. Now your agreement, or that agreement with the McCormick Urban Village, they did agree to pay future impact fees that the city would charge to everyone. So in a sense, they're going to have two impact fees. They'll have that smaller fee they've already agreed to, that in most cases, I think you're refunding for projects they've constructed already, and then they would also be subject to the new impact fee. And then when we look at a growth share of those project costs, generally has to be somewhat proportional, but not as directly proportional as a SEPA impact or negotiated impact mitigation payment would be. There's a lot more flexibility, which is another advantage to impact fees. So when we went through that exercise for your comprehensive plan, looking at the growth forecast that was predicted there, we looked at how many more vehicle trips system-wide, so across the whole city that would generate, and then looked at the cost, and came up with growth being responsible for about 42% of that transportation plan that's in your comprehensive plan. Because of the way the traffic forecast was done, we can't directly calculate with a really fine-tooth comb growth share. It could be as high as 75%, or even almost $6,800 per trip if we did a little more refined travel demand modeling, but that gets fairly expensive. And the 42% is about on par, a little higher than average. Most cities end up around 35 to 40% in terms of the proportion of impact fee revenue to total capital facilities cost. So a couple of other issues. Again, at 42%, there will be other revenues required to fund that transportation plan. So the impact fees seldom, if ever, and can't be 100% of the need. Anticipated grant revenue is out there. Jennifer mentioned some advantages of the regional planning in terms of that those federal funds that filter down are often a good way to match the impact fees you're collecting, especially for more regional facilities, which are the bigger, more expensive projects. But clearly you need to kind of come up with that other 58% of the project cost. So impact fees get you a good way towards implementing your plan, but they won't pay for 100% of it. And that would best be addressed as you move into updating the transportation plan in the comprehensive plan. So just some examples to kind of help see what that would mean in terms of different development types in the city. So if we looked at the $3,900 roughly impact fee, a single family home, that's per PM peak hour vehicle trip, I should clarify. So 1 PM peak hour trip, those are really the easiest to measure. We have the most data. So a 100-unit subdivision would pay slightly under $400,000 in impact fees. Apartments generate fewer trips in the peak hour, and so they would pay less per unit, so they would pay roughly $230,000. So you begin to almost create an incentive for higher densities. Higher densities do generate fewer trips. They require less transportation infrastructure. And then for specialty retail, which would be more kind of maybe a waterfront type retail development, a 10,000 square foot store. If we just went straight by kind of what we call the ITE, Institute for Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual, that would be about $72,000 or $7.25 per square foot. So if you had a chance to read the rate study, there was a table in the back where we had calculated the per square foot fees for a lot of different type uses. So for instance, a 120,000 square foot Home Depot type store would be about $500,000 in impact fees. A 120,000 square foot, what we call discount superstore, say a large Fred Meyer, one of the bigger Targets, would be about $1 million. So just, that's where that 3889 would get you.
Are you using the same $7.25 number when you talk about those kind of stores?
No, so every type of use has a different trip generation rate per square foot. So specialty retail is a little lower, and then grocery store is a little higher. So that's why that table is almost over a page, is each use has a different fee per square foot. Looking at things in the future, to keep in mind that your project costs could change, and as those project costs change, you might want to look at a mechanism for updating the impact fee. Your projects could change, particularly as you move into updating your comprehensive plan, re-looking at the future, and seeing how that 20-year project list could shift. And then also looking at just comprehensive plan updates in general in terms of level of service policies that might either add projects to your list or remove them from your list. If you're willing to tolerate a little more congestion, you might defer some projects to the future, or if you want to, again, incentivize and have better transportation mobility, you might add projects. So again, looking at where your impact fee might be and comparing it to averages, which everyone always wants to do, I always caution that there is some value in comparing to your neighbors, but really your impact fee is driven by your comprehensive plan, by your level of service standard, and by that project list, and then how much growth you expect. And so some cities have very high impact fees. For instance, the highest one in the state, the city of Sammamish, which I actually live in, and worked on that one. That impact fee is really high because they have a very expensive transportation improvement plan and relatively small forecast in additional growth. So if you have little growth, expensive projects, you end up with a lot of costs per project. And at $14,000, that impact fee is recovering about 37% of their transportation capital facilities plan. So there's a lot of other funding sources they are having to look at. The minimum is your own county, $515 per PM peak hour trip. That's not very much at all. It doesn't go very far, but it is something. Some neighbors nearby, City of Gig Harbor, is about $2,100, although we're working with them on an update now to kind of look at where that should be. And City of Poulsbo, about $2,800. So almost the average exactly. There are some adjustments we typically make with impact fees. So while we provided that estimate, most developers will hire a traffic engineer to look for opportunities to reduce either their trip generation or the fee that they would be paying. It's also good to know that credits are available for any project or dedication of land related to a project that is in that impact fee calculation. So you're not double charging. If someone's doing frontage improvements on one of your CIP projects, they get credit for the value of the land they dedicate to right-of-way and the construction there. So that's a benefit as well. Adjustments that are hard to capture in a rate table, those square foot numbers we provided, are mixed use. So typically, if you have a project that's mixing residential, retail, and maybe office, there's some internal capture trips that stay on that site. And so there are procedures to allow a reduction in the impact fee for that type of efficiency, which again encourages that type of development a little more. Some unique land uses that are not in the ITE trip generation manual, in which case the developer would bring a study to show here's the amount of trips we think we're going to generate, which you would then use the rate per trip. The ITE manual also has some of the rates are a little outdated. So again, we find that the rates for banks in particular, the data is about 10 or 15, 20 years old when everyone drove to the bank and cashed their check, which a lot fewer people are doing now. So virtually every bank we see will propose an alternative trip generation to that ITE report, and we generally accept that data based on a study they've done for other locations. And then adjustments for existing uses. So we're not going to be penalizing redevelopment. If someone's going into a facility that already existed, we would look at what did that facility generate in terms of traffic before, and if they're generating in that same window, they wouldn't have to pay an additional traffic impact fee. The assumption is that existing facility had made their payments either when it was constructed or over time during the life of the project. And so if one retailer goes in and a similar retailer, one goes out, similar one comes in, they wouldn't necessarily pick or pay more impact fees unless it was a substantially different use. So that was it, nice and brief. I'm sure you have some questions.
Actually, I'd like a clarification, because I know I've had a few people actually call and ask questions. So if you could possibly explain the definition, there's a difference between an ITE trip and trips as you hear it in other sorts of analysis. For example, there's usually like 6.2 trips per home in a different definition, but in this particular impact fee, it's the specific ITE trips that are defined in the ITE manual, where a home is 1.02.
Correct, yeah.
So if you could maybe elaborate on that, because again, there is some confusion. Some people have it's a impact fee per door or impact fee per ERU.
Sure.
This is specific to the ITE trip generation manual.
Correct. So that baseline, roughly $3,800 fee, that was all the trips estimated in your plan based on the cost of the project. And when we then have to generate that table in the back, it's all based on that same dollar amount per trip. But as Mark said, every use tends to, according to ITE, generates a different number of trips per square foot. So typically what you'll establish is a rate per single family home, just because it's an easy number to see. You might have one more rate for residential for multifamily, which is about 0.6 trips during the PM peak. And then the GMA does require what we call a rate schedule. So rather than just having everyone guess and calculate the traffic, we provide that ITE trip generation manual information. A couple of other adjustments you'll notice in that table are some adjustments we call for pass-by trips. So some uses, like a grocery store, a significant percentage of the traffic that's going in and out of a grocery store was already on the street in front of the store. So we reduce their impact fee effectively, because up to 37% of the traffic going in and out of the driveway at that grocery store was already on the roadway network. It just happened to pull in, buy some stuff, pulled out and left. It's not a new trip generating new traffic impacts. So those rates are different for all those land uses. So that's another adjustment. And that's another adjustment that a traffic engineer for a developer may suggest that it's a little different locally. So it's really, your fee starts out as based on per trip, because we took the total number of trips expected over 20 years and their proportion of your 20-year CIP. And then the table really helps us proportionally assess the trips to the various uses.
Questions?
Looking at the table at the back, it doesn't appear that Bremerton is listed. Is that because they don't have?
Yeah, I Googled that this morning because it wasn't in the table that I got from Bellingham either, and I could not find an impact fee on their website, so I don't know that they have one. So you don't have to have one. Again, a lot of jurisdictions use the SEPA process, and again, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Is it looks outwardly like you aren't charging for transportation, but it really just means a developer doesn't know what you're going to charge for transportation until they arrive, and they do they spend their money on the traffic study, and it tells them they've impacted 10 intersections, and their share of improvements is X 100,000, X million. So it's not that they aren't paying; it's just they haven't estimated the cost up front.
Do you also talk about some of the strategies for implementing the fee when you haven't had one, and how that would compare or contrast your development with adjoining areas? Like, if we instituted one here, how would that compare to people choosing the city versus the county, or choosing Gig Harbor?
Yeah, and I think impact fees are part of that picture. So again, having a known cost is a plus for a developer. I think you heard earlier this evening that having a market is even more important, and the stronger the market, the more a developer is willing to pay either for the land. If your market's very strong, the cost of land that's under the Home Depot is higher. So they're already paying maybe twice as much for the land in one market as they would in the other. So they're balancing a lot of pieces of information, and actually we do work with developers at our firm, and the most important thing to them or the biggest risk is uncertainty. If they know the cost, they can deal with that. If they don't know, that's a bigger problem. So, Costco, for instance, impact fees around $1 million is what they expect for a 150,000 square foot store. That's just the cost of doing business. It's not that big a deal. It's pretty rare that they will come out and say we're leaving because of an impact fee, because again, they would have paid something else anyway. So you really would have to dig into, what is, for instance, Bremerton exacting in other mitigation from developers. If a store has to build 3 traffic signals, well, that's $1 million right there. So with an impact fee, you might be building those traffic signals with a combination of projects.
So I have a question. I don't know if this is what Fred was kind of asking or not, but it made me think of it, which is Gig Harbor's, say, $2,200 or so for an impact fee. We're, say, if we adopt this sort of thing, we're $38. Does that discourage development?
Again, I think
Maybe that's not your expertise, but maybe that's Gary's expertise or something, but.
it could be. Again, it's a piece of the puzzle. So,
Piece of the puzzle.
I'd ask you, what's the price of square foot for commercial land in Gig Harbor and Port Orchard? Are you 20% cheaper on the base land value? That's going to go into that equation too. What's the school impact fee here? What's your stormwater requirement in terms of what they're going to have to build? How soon are you going to give them a permit? If they're sitting on a large site for 3 years trying to get a permit, they'll pay a lot more to get a permit in 90 days at that jurisdiction. So time is also, just time and money are equal to them. If they have certainty, they know they get through your process quickly, that saves them hundreds of thousands of dollars right there.
Yeah, and I guess if I could interject, I agree completely. When developers look at coming into an area, because I did this professionally for a number of years, you do your due diligence and you prepare your pro forma. And so the predictability is the most important piece that came out of GMA. It basically said time is money. We have a predictable outcome on what fees are going to be, as opposed to going into a project and not knowing what those impacts might be, what those impacts might cost as it goes through the SEPA process. We've got a number of projects that we've inherited that went through a SEPA process and had an impact mitigation fee applied in lieu of there being impact fees in place. That number was unknown until that project went through a hearing process. So having 2 key things. One is actually having the impact fee. It makes it predictable, and then there's a time savings associated with that. But also there's the credit piece, and we've had meetings on a major corridor with a major developer, and as soon as we talked about these projects being on our tip and them getting credit for those improvements, because the city would rather have the improvement, quite honestly, than the money, their eyes lit up because they just knew that the city was going to work with them on these impact fees to put it towards the improvement that ultimately gets people into their business. That's the other part of the equation, is you don't want to sink $1 million, $2 million into a site and people aren't going to naturally go to that property. I think we all have the mindset as we're driving down the freeway, I want to go to this business, but if you can't get to it, you're not going to go. So why spend millions of dollars on an improvement that you can't get to? And Gary spoke to that with Home Depot. They were fine until, they were dealing with the wetland issues, and then Lowe's jumped in, and, who's going to go to the middle of the Bethel corridor when they can go right off the freeway? So those are all things that go into your predictability, your pro forma, and so you can't do a apples to apples with what's around you. It's really like I said, it's a part of the pro forma equation.
I'm currently working with a developer who's developing in Sammamish and is going to be paying that $14,000 per PM peak hour trip for mixed-use development with a metropolitan market-type facility, some office, a medical facility, and about 150 residential units. So impact fee is only a little piece. The location, it's really more location. If the market is there, they make that investment.
Yes.
I
Ms.
have a
Ashby.
question. The actual numbers you used were out of our existing comp plan, is that correct?
Yes.
So when we go through the comp plan revision next year, those numbers could change if we change the transportation element of that.
Yeah, if you change the transportation project list, if you absorb more growth, for instance, if you had a larger growth allocation but the same project list could accommodate it, then the impact fee could go down. You'd have more payers for the same list of projects.
You basically use the same formula, you just plug in different
Right.
numbers.
So you have a format now that can be adjusted for changes in
So
your
how
comprehensive
often
plan.
would we update our impact fee? Is that something you do every 3 years? Do you do it?
Yeah,
So you would-
yeah, most agencies, if it's really more a function of has that comprehensive project list changed? Either a project got much more expensive than you anticipated, or did you approve a comprehensive plan amendment that significantly changed land use that would then change trip generation? So if nothing changed, you just really want to keep up with inflation. But then anytime you make a change, either add a project or change your land use, then you need to adjust the fee at that time.
It seems like a project that you should devise is one that takes care of that problem for the jurisdiction. Somehow or other is a combination of, a formula plus cost of living. So you could put that in when you start out, because it's always a problem when you don't do it, and time gets away from you, and then all of a sudden, you're looking at raising it to market, so to speak.
Yeah, we've done some ordinances that include basically a CPI adjustment. The Washington State Department of Transportation keeps a construction cost index annually, so you can track that. So some agencies just establish policy that as that index goes up and down, they adjust their project costs by that index. But you also have to consider other things that affect your project costs, like changing stormwater regulations. Things like that can also affect project costs. So it's
Not as easy as it sounds, is it, to make a formula that
yeah,
works?
there's so many variables, but I think it is a lot of work to do it as well. So every probably 3 to 5 years, adjusting every year becomes quite a bit of work as well.
Expensive, yeah. I see a member of the audience has their hand up. Would you entertain the idea of letting an audience ask a question?
Sure.
How do you feel? Okay. Yes, please come up and ask your question.
Since I don't know much about building, I'm wondering why apartments would have less of an impact on the roads and that than a single-family home. It was like close to half of what a single-family home, and it seems to me that there would be more transportation going in and out of that site over a longer period of time. So I'm just wondering how they've come up with the idea that apartments don't generate as much impact fees.
Thank you.
Sure. So again, that goes back to the ITE trip generation manual. So it's almost 50 years of data where essentially the process is the traffic in and out of a known complex, whether it's a single family subdivision or an apartment building, is counted on a daily basis. And then you divide that by the number of units. So one of the reasons apartments are lower is apartments are generally smaller than houses. So you have fewer residents, you have fewer teenage drivers in apartment complexes than you do in single family homes. Apartments, you have maybe 1.5 parking stalls per unit. Single family home, you have your 3-car garage with room for 4 more cars in the driveway. So you get more drivers with a single family residential area. Then that number includes the other traffic that's generated. So not just the people driving in and out of their home, but it's the service providers that are either making deliveries, it's the mail. It's used to be the milkman, not so much anymore.
Well, that even includes trips to the Pee Wee's Little League.
Exactly. And
All
that's,
those
again,
kind of road
bigger
usages.
families and single-family homes, they are going to, 3 or 4 different events every day. So while it's 1 p.m. peak hour trip, it's roughly 10 daily trips per single-family unit, and it's about 6.5 for a multifamily unit. So there's still traffic there. Often it looks like it's more because it's concentrated. You have 100 units with 2 driveways versus you have a 100-unit subdivision. You don't see all those cars in the same place at the same time. That apartment building driveway looks busy, but it's actually fewer trips per unit.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
No? Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Well, I'm really happy to do this if Mr. Martin would come up here front and center. You can raise both hands, but I received this, and I have a letter I'd like to read, but I'd like to give this to you to hold and take back with you and thank your whole department. But allow me to read the letter and turn to so that people in television audience could see you. This is to notify the city of Port Orchard. Port Orchard's 2004 budget has earned the Washington Finance Officers Association Distinguished Budget Award, and that award is what Alan is holding. This award is patterned after the Government Finance Officers Program and is the highest form of recognition in fiscal planning and budgeting within the state of Washington. The budget document is judged on meeting program criteria, covering policies, operations, financial planning, and communications. In order to earn this award, the budget document we are talking about has been critiqued by no less than 2 interviewers and has been found rated, by 2 interviewers who have rated the document as meeting or exceeding proficiency level. And the City of Port Orchard's document has met all that criteria. So thank you very much, Alan, and your whole department. Appreciate it. Give them a Thank you. Good job. Okay. We'll give Mr. Martin an opportunity to sit down and gather his thoughts, and because he's our presenter for public hearing 6A, revenue sources hearing. Mr. Martin, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mayor, members of the Port Orchard City Council, citizens of Port Orchard, and interested citizens. The city legislative body is required to hold a revenue sources hearing on the current expense budget revenue sources for the coming year's budget, including consideration of possible increases in property tax revenues. The hearing is required before the legislative body votes on a property tax levy for the upcoming year. The deadline for setting the levy for property tax collection for 2015 is on or before November 30th, 2014. This hearing is part of the public process that leads to an ordinance being forwarded to the Kitsap County Assessor, along with a levy certification in order to set the property tax levy for collection in the year 2015. The hearing will include a PowerPoint presentation of revenue sources and estimates for 2015. Handouts were provided to the council, and I think you found them on in front of you there, and then also we had some copies for the citizens as well. Current expense budget means the budget which is primarily funded by taxes and charges and reflects the provisions of ongoing services. It does not mean the capital, enterprise, or special assessment budgets. The fiscal impact is it leads to the setting of the property tax levy for collection in the 2015 tax year, and the recommendation is to open the public hearing.
I thank you, and I hereby open the public hearing.
Thank you. I direct your attention up here. This is the required, as I mentioned, by state statute. All cities throughout the state of Washington have this hearing held in October. It's statutorily required both to have it and in the time frame that it is to be made. It's, as I mentioned, it doesn't mean it. The budget means a budget that is primarily funded by taxes and charges and reflects the provisions of ongoing services. Current expense budget, as I mentioned before, does not include anything in the capital budget, enterprise, or special assessment budgets, and what that really means is, in our case, this does not include the utilities. This is only what we refer to as the general fund, or you'll hear it called the current expense fund. Really what it makes up is for us would be the street, mainly street fund and the general expense fund. The 2015 tax revenue is estimated to be $7,861,500. That pie chart shows that there's 3 main revenue sources, 3 legs to the stool. Sales tax is estimated to be $3,900,000 collection in 2015. Other taxes, which we'll get to in just a moment, $1,670,700. And then property tax is estimated to be at $2,290,800. The tax revenue is broken down. Retail sales and use tax, which I just mentioned at nearly $4 million, is 49.6% of the 2015 revenue. Property tax at $2.2 million at 29% of that. So you can see the highest taxes that the city relies on to operate at its current expense are both retail sales and property tax, with retail sales tax being the largest. Other taxes are your franchise taxes, which is electrical tax on electrical distribution here in the city, $650,000, telephone, $318,000, utility tax, that's a tax that you charge on your utilities, and we charge our own utility a utility tax, $275,000. Garbage, $123,000, TV cable, $81,700. Gas is the franchise fee on natural gas, $62,000. Gambling, $71,000. That could be pull tabs and the like. Admissions tax is your ticket sales, $60,000. That'd be for going to the theater to see a movie, for example. And then leasehold excise tax, $30,000. So there is the breakdown by percent of total tax and also the total amount of tax that we would anticipate receiving in 2015. This is 2015 revenue all sources. So this is not only taxes, but we have other revenues as well. So the pie gets a little bit larger. It gets to $9,356,124. And really the interesting part that changes that is this other revenues here, which are not general taxes, if you will. It's licenses and permits, intergovernmental charges, charges for goods and services, fines and forfeitures, and then some miscellaneous revenue, and that makes up $1,494,624. So that's the big pie there of your general fund and street. This is a budget revenue comparison so that you have some idea where you were at last year. On the left is 2014. That's your adopted budget numbers. So you can see a comparison of where we thought we'd have sales tax was $3,723,000. We're predicting $3,900,000, an increase of 4.75% in 2015. Property tax up just ever so slightly, 2%. Your tax isn't going to go up 2%. It's that the city has the ability to take more tax than it did last year because we were constrained by the highest allowable levy. Other taxes, I have to look at that category really quick. 4.6% is made up of the other taxes, back to that other category on the following chart. License and permits, we predict to be down ever so slightly. Intergovernmental revenue, charges for services, fines and forfeitures, and miscellaneous revenue are represented there. And so they're actually down over what we believe our other taxes will be. But the overall, we think revenue is going to be up 2.1%.
Can I ask
Sure.
Can I ask a question? Just so that I understand, the 2014 column, that was last year's budgeted amount.
That's correct.
How does that relate to actuals this year?
I'm going to jump up to that in just a little bit. Okay. But generally, the city has traditionally budgeted conservatively on revenues, knowingly so and consciously so, and that served the city well. So most of the time you will probably see higher than expected. So we budget revenue low and expenses high, and we live somewhere in between. This is property tax collection history. You'll see in 2012 what we actually received, the $2.1 million in 2012. We had annexations, as you know, jumped up in 2013 to $2.3 million. We have budgeted in 2014 $2,244,000, and then we have budgeted in 2015 $2,290,800. Now, you always receive 100% of your property tax because, as you know, the county, the state, and the county, the city, as a levy collector, has the ability to foreclose on property that's not paid. And so you always are to collect 100% unless there's some kind of damage or destroyed property, which really is not a very large column. But you don't necessarily collect all of it in the year that you thought you were, because not everybody pays their property tax on time. So even though you're going to get 100% of it, you may not get 100% of it in that year. And you may get more in a future year because people didn't pay a back tax, but then all of a sudden at some point, maybe a large landowner does pay that tax and bring it current. And so you do get 100%, but maybe not right at the moment you thought you were going to. Property tax history is on a levy year basis. This shows the assessed valuation and the fluctuations there. Our changes, of course, through annexation. Our levy rate, we share a levy rate. We've talked about that in past years. We share a levy rate with the fire district and also with the library district. And the library district doesn't take its maximum 50 cents per thousand, which allows us to take a portion of the total $3.60 per thousand that's allowed by local government. So anyway, so we do get, that's why that fluctuates. It depends on what the fire district takes, what the library takes, and then what's left over for the city. And generally that, when I came and joined the city back in 2009, I think your levy rate was $2.14 per thousand. And of course that levy rate's been dropping for several reasons, and of course we annexed into the library district. And where we used to collect the tax and pay it through a calculation and mail the money to the library district, now it's done by levy, and the county assessor sets that levy and sends it to them directly. No vote of the people on that. This calculation shows the levy rate for 2014, the amount levied. There was new construction that was new assessed value, and there was annexations that gave us new value, and then also there's a process where you can go back and get refunds back through a process that we could discuss in more detail later. And those, and you can see that our highest lawful levy, what the city could actually legally collect, was the amount that was actually the actual levy amount that was allowed in 2013. So we were constrained by not to be able to take the new construction and the annexation and refunds last year. However, in 2015, you can see we start out with the allowed levy, but we do have a 1% increase that's allowed under the statute. We have new construction that assess value. There are refunds, and we can take $22 of the refunds. So not only can we get our highest allowable levy now grows from that $2,240,898. We get to take those other statutory allowed increases. So the amount that we should be able to collect will be $2,292,168. As important as property tax, the city of Port Orchard receives a 8.84% sales tax. You can see what was actually collected in 2012 and 2013, and then was budgeted and what we've collected year to date is $2,851,852. So actually a 4.1% increase over what we thought that we were going to, and that kind of cuts to Councilperson Ashby's question and comment that we budget conservatively, and I wouldn't say hope for more, but plan for more to some degree. There's the amount that we expect to see next year, is that $3.9 million. This is sales tax collected by month, and it just shows you that I think you can see the totals down there for 2012 and 2013 and where we're at currently in 2014. And as the Council Finance Committee's discussed, each month's been up, I think, except two were slightly down, and for no particular reasons. But anyway, we're up, and we're pleased about that. This is a sales tax, and I think this just is instructive to show you that there is a real pattern to people's buying habits. And you can see you have the January, February collections are coming off of your Christmas and holiday buying, and then it falls down, and it just follows this almost predictable pattern. As you can see, school gets out and people start spending money. They do home projects and the like and that type of thing. There's school buying, getting ready for fall, putting up the garage. For me, buying another blue tarp for the outbuilding. And then you just ruin, it's just the exact same pattern almost every year. Although I only have to buy one tarp about every 2 years. There's the seasonal revenue flows for all revenues. As you can see, you've heard me talk before that there's actually a cash flow reason that some of the money that we have in the bank that we call reserves is there for cash flow purposes. Because you can see that we have, this is called, this is called the classic W in municipal finance, where you get these two peaks, where you get your first half property tax and your second half property tax, and you can see that there's some citizens out there that just say, hey, I'm in a position to pay it all at once, and they do that. You didn't see that quite, when I started that many years ago, you didn't see that high, because in those days your interest rate earnings for money left in the bank was pretty high. So what you saw is you saw this peak a little bit different as people did cash management. And of course you wanted to hold on to your penny as long as you could to get that, as we remember, 9% interest, if you can actually imagine that. But that's not the case today. So that concludes my remarks, but I do want to get back to Councilperson's Ashby question. And could you rephrase it? Because I really didn't have a slide that really got to it.
I was just looking at,
11.
is it 11? Oh, that's not the one I was.
6.
Yeah. The only, I was just wondering how the column 2014 compared to actuals from what we had budgeted. And obviously, the sales tax is up a little bit. Property tax wouldn't have a reason to be up.
Right, that's correct.
Yeah.
I would point out that we did post today this presentation for 2015. Also, directly to your question, we published, and you had in your inbox, the preliminary budget worksheet, and there you'll find a comparison for 2013, 14, and currently, and that should give answer it on each line item for each particular tax, and that should help do that. Also, and for the citizens, they can access it on the website. Go to City of Port Orchard, Departments, Finance Publications. There you'll see my photograph, and also next to that you'll see this booklet. So,
and now I have another question. You've talked about the levy rate and how when you first came it was 2.14 and now it's down, apparently anticipated at 1.71. But that can be influenced by the fire levies and library levies. What is the minimum levy amount that we would get?
That's an excellent question, $1.60 per thousand.
So we budget for what we know it's going to be next year, but it could go as low as $1.60 per thousand.
That's correct, but of course the fire. This is more of an assessor's question, but the fire district is for all purposes at its statutory limit. And then, of course, the library district will take over time for it with those other constraints of raising it to be able to move to their 50 cents per thousand. Whether or not the library district would take that would be, of course, a policy decision by that body. But over time, you're correct. that it will move to $1.60 per thousand.
So then if the library takes more, we get less, and we get closer to the $1.60 then, is what
That's
you're saying.
correct. Exactly.
So because this is my first year being involved with the budget process, when we do our budget, the amount over the $1.60, in this case, it would be, what, 11 cents from the $1.71. Do we use those 11 cents to pay for just one-time items? Or
This-
do we use those to pay for ongoing expenses?
The short answer is we do use them for ongoing expenses. The financial policies that we put into place a couple of years ago addresses that and said that the city should move to identifying the one-time, writing a definition of what is a one-time revenue, and then putting that into either a capital project or a known one-time expense. So we did address that, and that has been talked about even recently at the Finance Committee. And we're actually working on a project to come up and really get a good list of that. There's some, there isn't a perfect definition to a one-time revenue.
Right.
Now, some jurisdictions, for example, even on their building fees, their real estate excise tax and that sort of thing, will actually capture the sales tax that's being generated by that construction and say that that is a one-time fee as well. It's not actually a retail sale, if you will. So some jurisdictions go to a great length to identify these. Others do it less so, and we're on a path to do it more so. One question.
And Alan, the ones that do it more so are usually in better shape at the end of the day or at the end of the year?
If you have an economic downturn and you're relying on one-time revenue, say projects dry up, then you are put in a situation where you don't have that revenue coming in. So in that case, if they're not relying on their general operations for that money, their general operations continue and are not impacted by it. So it allows them to do less, but they still do their core responsibilities are not impacted.
Any other questions?
I have a question that's it's multi-jurisdictional. Do you anticipate the sales tax rate changing in the county?
I haven't heard any discussion about that at all. So I'd say, because I haven't heard anything, nothing's out there in the wind, and I haven't heard anybody seriously bring that up as a revenue source of going there. So I don't, on the risk of being wrong.
No, that's fine, because last year I think we do know that we had that 0.1% for the mental health.
Right, exactly.
So we went from 8.6 to 8.7.
Right.
But you haven't heard of anything comparable for like the passenger ferry or anything like that?
Absolutely not. I haven't heard anything in those regards. Your support and the budgeting award, I'm quite proud of that. The staff did an excellent job on that. I'm the beneficiary of their good work. And with your support, we've been able to use, as you know, the Springbrook software system, and that's been a big help and really made everything much better. A easier managed transaction down there for you all, and I think you should be real proud of all your departments. And of course, I'm very proud and ask you to recognize the good work that the finance staff does. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, this is a public hearing. I should open the mic up for anybody wishing to make any comments. If you'd like to, raise your hand if you have any comments on what was presented. All right, seeing nobody wishing to make any comments, I will close the public hearing, and we'll move on then. We're moving on to business item 7A, adoption of an ordinance amending the Port Orchard Municipal Code.
7C.
No, we're going to miss 7A and B to 7C. Approval of contract with Port Orchard. Bay Street Association for fertilizer hanging baskets downtown. Our attorney, Ms. Morris.
May I speak before? What I want to say is I'm willing to recuse myself from this particular issue if anyone would desire me to do so. It has to do with a contract with the Port Orchard Bay Street Association, and I am not on their board of directors, but when their treasurer passed away in August, I stepped up and have been doing the books for the Port Orchard Bay Street Association for since Lorraine's death. And I did turn the books over today to a new treasurer for them, but I just wanted everyone to know I do have an interest in the Port Orchard Bay Street Association.
Well, it's not a personal financial interest, though.
No, I just helped him out.
No, that's not an interest.
Okay. How do you feel? Anybody?
Okay with me?
Seeing no objection then, thank you for making that a public statement, so. All right. Okay.
Council, as you know, the city has statutory authority to spend money on tourism promotion, and it's my understanding that the council discussed this in the past. I wasn't here when this occurred, but the Port Orchard Bay Street Association provided 28 decorative hanging planter baskets along the downtown marquee on Bay Street. Then they hired a contractor to fertilize those hanging baskets over an 18-week period, and it cost them over $2,000. They agreed to pay everything over $2,000, and it's my understanding that the city agreed to reimburse them $2,000. So they submitted an invoice for this cost, and in emails back and forth with the city attorney, a simple contract was discussed, as well as a condition that the city, that Port Orchard Bay Street Association comply with certain requirements like payment of prevailing wage. So I drafted up a simple contract, and this is here for council to act to authorize the mayor to sign.
What's your pleasure, council?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Go ahead and make a motion to get this going. I move that we authorize the mayor to sign the proposed agreement between the City of Port Orchard and the Port Orchard Bay Street Association for tourism promotion and making reimbursement of $2,000 towards the association's costs for the provision of 28 hanging planter baskets along the downtown marquee on Bay Street and the hiring of a contractor to fertilize these baskets for a period of 18 months.
Okay, we have a motion.
Excuse me, 18 weeks. Thank you.
We have a motion, second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Open for discussion. Any discussion? Yes.
So this has been a long time since we've dealt with this, and weren't we originally looking at LTAC funds? I don't remember, Fred, no? Okay, I'm okay with this. We wanted to do it back then.
We weren't talking about LTAC because this came up after the budgeting period. It would have had to have been budgeted for last year for this year expense.
Okay.
It just didn't happen that way.
And then we had a discussion on gift of public funds, I think was the issue. And you're okay with all of that?
Right, as part of tourism promotion.
Good.
Many cities do that.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
I do have a question. I see, is this the invoice, Ryan Properties and Maintenance? Is the invoice generated from Ryan Properties? Or was it another service that took care of this?
I can answer that. That invoice that's in front of you is from Ryan, but the payment's going to be to the Port Orchard Association. There's not going to be a payment. The agreement here is giving it to the association, not to who's invoiced. That invoice needs to go to the association, not to the city.
So it's my understanding then that Don Ryan service was the provider of the service for fertilizing the baskets, is that right?
I don't know who, I'm not aware of who actually did it.
Yeah, I mean, that's my understanding.
Well, again, I have knowledge of that, and the Port Orchard Bay Street Association solicited bids from, I'm going to say, 3 or 4 different vendors, and the bid that was accepted was the lowest one.
But this is Don Ryan?
It's one of his companies, yes.
Is there a conflict of interest at all with this, with his involvement in POPSA? I'm just wondering.
I don't know.
Well, it wouldn't be with us. It's not a conflict with the city. It would be within some other organization, right?
Well, this contract is with the Port Orchard Bay Street Association, so we're giving them the money, and then they pay the vendor.
I'm presuming that this is dated June 10th. Ryan's already been paid for this. This is just reimbursing the account to the best with $2,000. Now, with him paying prevailing wage, I'm assuming he paid prevailing wage, but he'll have to file an $80 intent on prevailing wage. That POVSA is going to have to cover that cost, or Ryan is going to have to cover that cost. So this donation, or whatever we ended up calling it, is just that. It's not going to cover the 100% of the cost. They'll be short certain fees that have to do with prevailing wage.
Any other discussion? All right, seeing no other discussion, then we're going to be voting on the motion on the floor to move the authorize the mayor to sign the proposed agreement. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you, that motion carries. Okay. Business item 7D, approval of change order number 15. Mr. Dorsey, could you bring us some updates?
Thank you, Mayor, council members. The Department of Transportation, Highway and Local Programs has determined that the Tremont Street widening project is currently deemed immediately ready to go with regards to potential construction funding opportunities. The purpose of this most recent change order is to provide the updated wetland flagging survey needed to utilize the remaining residual FHWA design or PE funding to complete the remaining locally required SEPA and JARPA permitting, to update the ECS NEPA approvals, and to provide project advancement that will keep the Tremont Street widening project off the FHWA inactivity list. Staff recommends that the City Council authorize the Mayor Pro Tem to execute Change Order 15 with Berger ABAM in an amount not to exceed $3,800 for the updated wetland topographic survey as needed for the required ECS NEPA update and complete the locally required SEPA JARPA permitting for the Tremont Street widening project for continued immediately ready to go status.
Okay, what's your pleasure? Yes.
I move to authorize the Mayor Pro Tem to execute change order number 15 with Berger ABAM in an amount not to exceed $3,800 for the updated wetlands topographic surveying as needed for the required ECS NEPA update and completion of the locally required SEPA JARPA permitting for the Tremont Street widening project.
I'd second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Yeah, I would just say that this is necessary, that we do this to be ready as Mark has laid out, and I'm for it. I don't see any problem.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, seeing none, we're going to be voting on the motion change order number 15 to contract number 002-05. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to 7E, approval of September 23rd council meeting minutes. They're in our packet. What's your pleasure?
I move to accept the minutes as written.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion, changes or corrections? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of approving September 23rd, 2014 council meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay? Thank you. That motion carries. Approval 7F, approval of temporary right-of-way. Ms. Reinerson, could you bring us up to speed on this one, please?
Yes, good evening, Mayor, Council. Walter Washington, the Kitsap County Auditor, submitted a letter requesting temporary use of 2 parking spaces on Division Street in front of the County Administrative Building. The hope is to alleviate traffic congestion on Division Street during this busy time. The parking spaces are requested for the following dates and locations. 2 spaces by the main entrance of the administrative building next to the handicap parking spaces during the last 2 weeks in April, the last 2 weeks in October, and on Election Day. They are also requesting 2 spaces next to the ballot drop-off slot in front of the county admin building at the corner of Division and Klein, 2 weeks before each election. This item has not gone before Public Properties Committee for recommendation, as their meeting date is after the time they are requesting use. Staff is asking the council to review the materials provided and either approve, deny, or modify the request. And here's the map.
I move to approve the use of city right-of-way parking stalls by the Kitsap County Auditor located by the main entrance of the county admin building next to the handicap parking spaces during the last 2 weeks in April, the last 2 weeks in October, Election Day, as well as the 2 spaces next to the ballot drop slot in front of the county admin building at the corner of Division and Klein, 2 weeks before each election.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So this is going to be ongoing on a permanent basis for every year?
Correct.
And so my only question, and maybe you don't know, but because I see where you took it out of the letter, where in the first request for the 2 spaces, the last 2 weeks in October and on Election Day, I know that Halloween falls on Friday, and Election Day is first Tuesday in November, so they don't need it on Monday for this year, and then they won't need it subsequent years if there's almost a week between the last day in October and the first Tuesday in November?
Well, they're requesting last 2 weeks in October and on Election Day, so if Election Day is in November, they're going to request that day in November.
But are they gonna put the sign up until the end of October, then run
gotcha.
out there on Monday, take the sign down, and then put the sign back? I'm assuming there's gonna be a sign. And I see
Yeah,
somebody
Dolores
with
is
her
here.
hand
She
in
wants
the
to
air.
step up and make a comment, yes.
Because if that's the case, I'd vote just to give it to both. I'm leaning towards just giving it to them until Election Day, but.
My name's Dolores Gilmore. I'm the Kitsap County Elections Manager. And the Treasurer's Office, what it is we're going to share the 2 spaces that are closest to the Administration Building main door. And the Treasurer's really only needs those until the end of October, which is their deadline. And that is the entrance coming, in for the vote center. We really only need those 2 spaces on Election Day.
Okay.
That's why we did the separate one by the ballot drop boxes. They're the last, the 2 weeks before each election. Those are the 2 busiest spots for us because people just do ballot drop during that time. So that's why they're different timing.
Clarifies it.
But,
Thank you.
if you want to give us more,
No,
we'll-
I don't want to give you any more than you're asking, but I just wanted to make
Okay.
sure that there wasn't something missing here. So
Yeah,
thank you.
and the Elections Division will handle, the signage for that. We anticipate the 2 spots by the Administration Building being a 15-minute limit, and then the 2 by the ballot drop a 5-minute limit. And we've been using those spots, I believe, since 2008 presidential election. The change in this is that now we're going to share that with the Treasurer's Office for their tax payments as well.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, well, we'll go ahead and vote to approve temporary right-of-way use, Kitsap County Elections and Treasurer's Office. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Thank you. Great. Appreciate it. Okay. 7G, approval of amendment with TriTech. Let's see, who's going to bring us up to speed on that? Is that yours, Mark? No, it's Clerk Reinerson.
Yes. Okay. So staff is in the final stages of replacing the current phone system, and the city is slated to have the new phone system installed next week, October 20th, by TriTech Communications. And on Thursday, October 24th, the hope is that we will be live. During the preparation of the programming of the new phones, TriTech has brought it to my attention that they failed to include 2 licenses in their contract, which was presented to council and approved. The two licenses that were not listed in part of the contract approved by the council is critical to the installation of the phones. Those two licenses allows the server and the phone system to talk to each other. So the cost to implement these licenses is $520.80 plus tax. Staff recommends council approve the amendment to contract number 1, or excuse me, council approve amendment number 1 to contract number 68-14 with TriTech Communications for 2 additional licenses in an amount not to exceed $520.80 plus tax.
Council, what's your pleasure?
I'm going to go ahead and make a motion for discussion, but I'll go ahead and make it so we can get it moving. I move to approve amendment number 1 to contract number 068-14 with TriTech Communications, Inc. for 2 additional licenses in an amount not to exceed $520.80 plus applicable sales tax.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion.
It's a question. Randy, did they sign an agreement that they were going to do all these services, and then after that agreement was, I'm confused, because I'm just confused as to why they're coming back and asking for $520. Don't you have an executed agreement that they would do the work for a set dollar amount?
Well, when they provided the contract amount, they listed out everything that associated with that price. Includes, various licenses, the phone. It's a detailed list, and they just forgot to include those 2 licenses.
But isn't part of that contract to actually have the server talk with the phone system? I mean,
Yep.
it's not in the contract that the system would work when it was done?
Well, can I maybe help clarify? IT's involved with this as well, and so there's been additional work that the city's had to undertake to just have the equipment compatible in the building itself, like pulling certain wire. And so some of this was learned once we got in here to really see what we had as compatible equipment.
Okay.
So not all of this was, it wouldn't known then what we know now.
Didn't know until you pulled the subfloor off that the floor was
Yeah,
running.
and so that's a lot of how we ended up here tonight. And we talked about, different ways to pay this, but we thought the most transparent way was to bring it back to council and say, hey, it belongs as part of the contract rather than just paying it as a service.
Okay. That explains it. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Okay, seeing no other questions, then we'll be voting on the approval of the additional $520.80 plus tax. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay, that motion carries. Thank you. Councilwoman Ashby, tell us about 7H. Bring us up to speed.
But
there.
on 7H, the city of Port Orchard is involved with the West Sound Transportation Alliance, and this is through KRCC. And we are putting together a marketing plan or a ask to the legislative representatives in Olympia from the 23rd, 26th, 25th, and 24th districts. And we're asking, it's fairly comprehensive, asking for a significant transportation investment. And as part of that process, there will be marketing materials, including a video produced. And each jurisdiction that's part of the alliance had suggested that they would be willing to contribute $300 towards the development and completion of this marketing material. And we came back from that and wondered how we were going, where that money was come from. And Brandy indicated that there were funds available in the council budget, but it needed council approval to pay the expense. And so I was asking for consideration from the council to pay our $300 share of this marketing material. Is that fairly accurate, Mark?
Also, just addition, we'll have the use of this
Yes.
We'll probably end up with more than $300 worth of use for marketing for our
Right, they
orchard.
do want to create a video thinking that 1,000 pictures worth 1,000 words, and we want to provide enough thumb drives so that the legislators can share it with their contemporaries and see if we can get traction on this.
I guess my only concern is, I know the 300 is a negligible amount, but are we equally contributing to the video? Because as I recall from the West Sound Transportation Alliance, we're just a small portion of the beneficiary of that whole plan.
Correct. All of the jurisdictions were paying an equal amount. And if you want to talk just about equality with that, the Key Peninsula Parks, which is a very small entity, was willing to pay the $300.
Do they benefit more than we do?
No.
Actually,
No.
there is no, benefit at this
Well,
point.
no, but I
mean,
remember the project not being equal amongst all these partners in this. in that
Right.
sense. So-
That was never the intent. It was just to showcase the need with this consortium, with this
Well,
group.
it's a negligible amount, so.
I kind of look at it like it's the first trust issue for the Alliance. Is everybody willing to kind of pony up to the table and at least speak in terms of equals? So I'm for it. It's $300. It's minimal, and it shows that
It's in the
we're
budget.
Yeah, and we're a willing participant of West Sound Alliance.
Yeah.
We'll get way
I
more
think
out
that-
of it than $300.
To add to the conversation, I mean, that was basically the mission statement that came out of the alliance, was that this was an alliance and no one jurisdiction has any additional responsibility or additional clout or additional need, that's how we're going to get traction, is to be equally supportive and be equitable in all regards. I mean, that was kind of the first major mission statement.
Well, that's nice to say, but still the area that we're talking about is not equally benefiting all the partners. But I think I've said enough on this.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, then we'll be voting on.
Well, we need a motion.
We don't even have a motion.
That's right, we're just discussing and we're.
Want to make the motion?
Well, I would move that we contribute $300 to the marketing effort of the West Sound Transportation Alliance.
Second.
Okay, now we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we're going to vote yea to contribute to the West Sound Alliance up to $300. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we're through with our business items. Reports of committees. Mr. Clausen is not here. Does anyone have a report for Mr. Clausen?
You talking about finance?
Yes.
Well, the main thing that came through is the revenues. I mean, we had some discussions otherwise, but the main thing that came through is revenues are still trending ahead, and things are looking pretty good. I think our treasurer pointed that out again tonight, so that's about it.
Okay. Economic Development and Tourism. Ms.
And
Ashby.
we have not met since our last meeting. Our meeting that was scheduled this Monday was postponed until October 27th. So we'll be meeting here October 27th at 10 o'clock.
Thank you. Mr. Patonsu has the next two, Utility and Sewer Advisory. And does anyone have?
I'm going to, in his stead, just announce that the next utilities meeting is November 11th, at 7:30 at the Pancake House. And the next sewer advisory meeting is October 22nd at 6:30 at West Sound offices.
Okay. Public Property Committee, Mr. Cartwright.
Same as economic, we had to postpone yesterday's meeting and we moved it to October 27th. It will be 8:30 here in the council chambers.
Thank you. Lodging Tax Advisory, Mr. Chang.
No, nothing to report.
Okay. Chimes and Lights, Ms. Lucarelli.
Our next meeting is tomorrow afternoon at 3:30 here in City Hall, and we're moving along nicely. We have the inserts that are being prepared for the billing, so we'll be seeing those in the next months with all the utility billing. And tomorrow we'll be discussing some of the logistics.
Okay, thank you. Outside agency, Ms. Ashby, do you have any reports for us?
Yes, very brief. We went to the PSRC meeting last Thursday, and the agenda just had discussion items, no action items. And basically, they discussed potentials for future funding, and I'm trying to remember, it was riveting, you can tell. But they did have some discussion about transportation funding in the future. And then we went from that to the West Sound Transportation Alliance meeting, and that group is coming together nicely. They're working on the project list. They're working on an economic statement to go with the ask to the legislators to let them know how important transportation is to the economic vitality of the area, the entire Puget Sound region. And that is all I have to report.
Thank you. Mr. Cartwright, do you have your special report? Any others reports?
Actually, I do.
I do too.
Mine will be brief. I attended a PSRC Growth Management Policy Board meeting as the alternate on Thursday, October 2nd. And the most contentious item they spoke about was actually items 9 and 10, where they spoke about military industrial centers getting a different kind of categorization. And there was dispute about it, you could tell, between the people who felt that it was in their area, like Bremerton's one, Marysville's another. They wanted to be included in this classification for potential transportation funding. However, certain east side cities didn't seem to like this idea at all and felt that it was skewing the mission statement in the sense of including them in the potential area as a potential beneficiary. There was no vote on it. It will actually be coming up next month. And the person who actually votes for us as a smaller Kitsap city is Paulsbo, Linda Berry Murray.
I was just going to say, the Kitsap Economic Development Alliance is holding the Decision Makers event next week on the 23rd at the Silverdale Beach Hotel, and the whole council's been invited. I think Beck said you're going. I don't know if anybody else here is going, but it's always informative, and everybody shows up to.
Okay, all right, very good. We'll move on quickly to the mayor's report. I just have 3 short items. Number 1, the newest newsletter is out. There's some copies on the back table just outside of the doors. You can also go online at cityofportorchard.us and look up the latest newsletter, October 2014 newsletter. It's online. It's on the printed copy in the back. Pick up one on your way out. Mr. Dorsey talks about a few changes we've got in the Treasurer's Department. Public Works gives us a lot of good information here, and then the Police Department gives us some safety tips for going into fall and winter. It's worth reading, so pick it up or go online. The other 2 items, I'm hosting a town hall meeting November 13th. Coming up, and I always talk about something for the first 5-10 minutes to kind of get the conversation going. I'm going to be talking about family disaster plans and disaster supply kits. Just in general, this is just citizen to citizen, and I will be taking some questions as to what plans the city has to help in disasters and things like that. So I think it'll be a good starter of conversation for that. And then wherever it goes from there, if you've ever attended one of these, it's up to you. It's not up to me, and it just goes wherever it goes. And so please put that on your calendar. It starts at 6:30, and it's right here in this room. So that's all I have tonight. Thank you. Okay, we'll be going on to report of department heads. Mr. Dorsey.
I don't think I have anything.
Okay, well, okay, Mr. Martin.
There again, I thank Mr. Dorsey for yielding his time to the treasurer. I just want to, it's very, very busy in the treasurer's office. This is our busy time of the year. Last Friday, we had the entrance conference with the state auditor's office. Councilman Childs attended, as did the mayor, and I thank them for that. They went over what specific areas they're going to look at in their 2013 audit, looking at the 2013 year. They've been in the office for about a month and started their work. They probably have another month to go. And so anyway, that was very helpful to let us know what they particularly are going to look at this year. And of course, audits can go in any direction and once they start to follow a transaction. But thank you all for attending that. The next work study, we will have a budget item there. I think we have 30 minutes at least started to start a conversation on the council. October 31st is scheduled department heads interviews with the Council Finance Committee is scheduled for that time. November 12th, the meeting there is where the resolution setting the amount of property taxes to be levied for the year 2015 will be in front of you, and that, of course, is a follow-on from the hearing that we had earlier tonight. Work study on November 18th is the very large 2015 budget discussion, because there we'll be closing in on passing the budget. The public hearing and first reading of the 2015 budget ordinance is set for November 25th. So that's not a lot of time for staff to make changes in your budget document and get a good booklet on the street for the citizens. But we'll work to get that done. And then the adoption of the 2015 budget is set for December 9th. That can be held over to a later meeting, but of course by statute we have to have a budget by December 31st. So thank you all for your support, and I look forward to working with Mr. Dorsey the rest of the week. Thank you.
City Attorney, Ms. Morris.
Nothing.
Nope. Okay, City Clerk, Ms. Reinerson.
I don't have anything, thank you.
All right. Well, we're down to citizen comments for the second time. If you'd like to make a comment, please come up.
I just wanted to share that I attended last Wednesday's utility meeting, and I learned that our present UGA is exceptionally large when it is looked at in comparison with other jurisdictions, and that the comp plan is required to prepare for that. I also listened to the gap analysis given by Katie Isaacson regarding our water sewer, and I was really taken back to learn that the present projections estimate that our sewer costs by 2020 could reach $260 a month. And I know we have various capital projects that need to be attended to, and I'm hearing talk about shrinking the UGA. And I'm just really concerned how all of this is going to factor out, and I really, really want everybody to know about it. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Last chance. Okay, seeing no other comments. We have no executive session, so if
Move to
nobody
adjourn.
objects, we stand adjourned.